They might have wished it was muted after this. But hi, I'm Kit. I am, well, most of you probably know me from Bio, but I'm also a PhD student at the University of Colorado, where I work in information science and interdisciplinary quantitative biology. And in interdisciplinary quantitative biology, I'm helping out on this NASA BioSCape project, where we're using hyperspectral and multi-scale imagery to understand biodiversity and invasive alien species in South Africa. Unfortunately, these are not extraterrestrials, even though we are working with NASA, it's trees. So, yeah. Can you click on it again? I think it might have. Perfect. Okay, so BioSCape stands for Biodiversity Survey of the Cape, and this is actually NASA's first biodiversity field campaign, where we're incorporating airborne imaging, spectroscopy, LiDAR, and field observations. And this is on the greater Cape Thoristic region, which we are including the coastal and marine environments in the scope of this grant, but I'm just going to be talking about a very, very small portion of this grant. So what's interesting is this area is one of the world's 35 biodiversity hotspots, and 69% of the estimated 9,000 species that comprise the GCFR are expected to be endemic, and parts of it are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And it does comprise of about 4% of South African land. And what's super crazy and why it's really important to protect this area is 67% of the country's threatened plant taxa exist in this small area. So, and that is the fynbos vegetation, which is an Old Dutch word for fine bush, and it's very well adapted to grow in this nutrient deficient soil and very tough climatic conditions. Unfortunately, there are 4 main invasive species that are starting to overtake the Cape, including pine, acacia, eucalyptus, and picea. And where this is a big issue is especially, like lots of issues, but the fire regime is particularly impacted by this. One, pine fires are very, very large. I think I put it here, yeah. So typically fire seasons with fynbos are about 3 to 5 tons per hectare of biomass fuel loads for burning. And then pine fires take up to 10 to 25 tons per hectare. So not only are you seeing these very detrimental fires, pines also consume more water. So you're taking more out of the water table just by them existing, and then causing more catastrophic fire events. And we're kind of hoping to see how we can you click on it? Yes. And we're using imaging platforms. So how we're getting this imagery, we are using 3 scales. The one that we're focusing on the most is this middle scale, which is AVERS data, PRISM data, HEIGHTS data, and we're using the NASA G3 and G5 research aircraft with 3 imaging spectrometers. So we're using, these first 3 are spectrometers. These are both in the EMR, so the electromagnetic range. This is an emissivity metric, so looking at thermal emissions. And then we're also, for structural, using the ELVIS LiDAR system from NASA. And how this kind of all incorporates into imaging is we have people on the ground. We are potentially putting drones in here, but we haven't done that yet. So right now we have people on the ground, below cloud aircrafts, and then satellite imagery that's all coming together to kind of understand invasion at a larger scale. So we start at the ground, and we are taking samples, validation data, finding out where the invasive species are. So when we do go up to this AVERS data, so we're using like support vector machine learning classifications, random forests, like a bunch of different machine learning algorithms to kind of classify where these guys are, and then apply that to other areas of the ecosystem that we don't have imaging on. And putting it into this middle layer, which is where we're looking at spectral and structural diversity. I'm mainly looking at spectral diversity, and we're using an algorithm based off of a paper published in 2020 called the La Liberté algorithm. It's an amazing paper. I would honestly recommend reading it. But what we're doing is we have these hyperspectral bands, so about 5 nanometers wide each. We have about 200 bands. In this system, if you're familiar with NEON, their hyperspectral instrument has 426 bands. And what we're doing is reducing it down to 2 or 3 bands via principal component analysis to kind of get spectral diversity metrics for these areas. And then pulling that out to look at how diverse an area is. And this next slide will kind of clarify that. So based on the algorithm, if you can pretend that this is a pixel from MODIS, so MODIS takes images at 250 by 250 meters. And we are putting it into communities of 50 by 50 meters. And in these 50 by 50 meter communities, we're overlaying the 5 by 5 meter average data that we have to get the spectral diversity in this area. What we're trying to look at is overall diversity, which is gamma diversity. Alpha diversity is what is the diversity within one single square, and beta diversity is in between communities. And where this is kind of important and super interesting, in my opinion, is there is a hypothesis based off of this grant, and what we're looking at is the more spectral alpha diversity you have and gamma diversity, the less likely there is an invasion happening because that species hasn't been able to come in and overtake the area. So looking at really like broad scale, large scale things, and something that I think would be super interesting in incorporating, and this is just more going into that, and like if you want like, because it took me like a week to understand this, so if you have questions, please feel free to ask me. We're kind of looking at like how it looks like with alpha diversity, so very diverse within a community, and then beta diversity, so very diverse between communities, because that can have different implications for invasion too. But what I think would be super interesting to also incorporate is vouchered specimens and observation records, so we can also have information from past field surveys and see how we can incorporate that to see a longer scale of invasion in these areas. So yeah, and after like all of that is when we want to go up to the satellite level and see how we can look at fuel loads, water efficiency, and productivity and stability of an environment after we have these other two layers that are kind of going up into it and having more data within that. It's kind of like subpixel analysis, not really, it's a very new thing, but yeah, that's just kind of the short of it. I know that was really fast, and please feel free to ask questions, but I would like to thank Laura D, Elisa Van Cleefit, and Alana Ravello. They've been helping me the most with this project, and also I want to thank my best friend Annika Jonker, who is from South Africa and has actually been answering a lot of questions that I have about the area and helping me translate some research that I find. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it, having imagery at multiple scales, seeing what we can garner from each level to understand how invasion is impacting the environment. And yeah, I'd really like to incorporate more natural history records for a fuller, broader view of these areas. So thank you.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
So are there maps? Are there images of? They're actually Landsat type images that go back on the page. So I'm looking at a specimen that was collected in 1929 or 1950. I could get the right map to overlay that and look at what you're talking about, where that specimen was then, as opposed to where it was now. So
the Landsat, the first Landsat mission launched in 1967, I believe. And like now we're on Landsat 9. So you can go all the way back to 67, and you have to do a couple of algorithms because the resolution for like Landsat 8 and 9 are much better than for Landsat 1. But yeah, that's actually something that I'm interested in doing, is like harmonizing or linking records with their respective time frame of when they were collected to Landsat imagery. So
Mark heard that for black and white.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember when the transition in color happened, but it seems to me that would be a
so
thing to know, so that you can match a collection to the actual physical landscape at the time. That was great talk. Thank you.